Liam had always been drawn to abandoned places, the kind of spots people left behind, where time seemed to stand still. As a photographer, he found beauty in decay, in the way rust and ivy claim what had once been new and alive. His camera was an extension of himself, and exploring forgotten corners of the world was his escape from the monotony of life. When his friend Noah mentioned the old train yard on the edge of town, Liam's interest was immediately piqued. Noah wasn't usually one for late-night adventures, but the way he described the place, a labyrinth of rusted train cars and crumbling tracks, was irresistible to Liam. "Trust me, dude, it's perfect for your kind of thing," Noah had said. "Creepy as hell, though. You might want to bring a flashlight." They planned the trip for a Friday night, reasoning that the weekend gave them plenty of time to recover. They stayed out late. Liam packed his camera gear meticulously, ensuring he had extra memory cards, fully charged batteries, and even a spare tripod. Noah, on the other hand, brought a flashlight, a couple of energy drinks, and, for reasons unknown to Liam, a crowbar. "What's the crowbar for?" Liam asked as they loaded up the car. "Just in case," Noah replied with a shrug. "You never know." The drive out to the train yard was uneventful, the kind of long, quiet drive through backroads that felt endless under the cover of darkness. The stars were bright overhead, and the occasional flicker of Liam's headlights catching the eyes of a nocturnal animal was the only movement in the vast stillness. When they arrived, Liam was struck by the sheer size of the yard. Rows upon rows of train cars stretched into the distance, their silhouettes casting jagged shadows under the moonlight. The place had an eerie beauty about it, a sense of abandonment and stillness that made Liam's fingers itch to grab his camera. "This is insane," he said, stepping out of the car. The air was cool and smelled faintly of rust and damp earth. "How did you even find this place?" "Google Maps," Noah said with a smirk. "It's not exactly on the tourist brochure." The two of them made their way into the yard, weaving between the train cars. Liam's camera clicked softly as he captured the scene: peeling paint, broken windows, and the way the moonlight danced on the metal surfaces. Noah trailed behind, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness. It wasn't long before they noticed the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that pressed down on you, making every creak and groan of the metal seem louder than it should be. Liam was too focused on his shots to care, but Noah was visibly uneasy. "Do you hear that?" Noah asked after a while. "Hear what?" Liam replied, lowering his camera. "Exactly nothing. No whine. Maybe the place is just that isolated. Weird." Liam shrugged. They continued deeper into the yard, the train cars looming taller the further they went. Liam stopped at one particularly striking car of faded blue, one with broken windows and graffiti that seemed to tell a story of its own. He climbed onto the platform and peered inside. The interior was just as he'd expected: dark, musty, and filled with debris. He raised his camera to capture the scene when he noticed something odd. There, in the corner of his frame, was a shape. It wasn't clear a shadow, maybe. He lowered the camera and looked, but the corner was empty. He frowned and lifted the camera again. The shape was there, but this time it seemed closer. "Hey, Noah," he called, his voice betraying a hint of unease. "Come look at this." Noah climbed up onto the platform, shining his flashlight into the car. "What is it?" "Something's not right," Liam said, showing him the camera screen. But when they looked together, the shape was gone. "Dude, you're just spooking yourself," Noah said, though his tone was less convincing than his words. "Let's keep moving." They moved on, but Liam couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Every so often, he thought he saw movement in the corner of his eye, flicker of shadow, or the glint of something metallic. He told himself it was just his imagination, but the feeling lingered. Then they heard it. A metallic clang echoed through the yard, sharp and deliberate. They both froze, their breath catching in their throats. "What the hell was that?" Noah whispered, gripping the crowbar tightly. "I don't know," Liam said, his voice barely audible. "Probably just the wind," but they both knew it wasn't the wind. The clang came again, this time closer, and then, unmistakably, the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate footsteps. "Let's get out of here," Noah said, backing away. Liam nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. They turned to retrace their steps, but the train yard suddenly felt like a maze. Every row of cars looked the same, and the darkness seemed thicker now, the flashlight beam barely cutting through it. The footsteps grew louder, more insistent. Liam risked a glance over his shoulder and froze. A figure stood at the far end of the row, silhouetted against the faint light of the moon. It wasn't moving, but it was watching them. He was sure of it. "Run," Liam whispered, and they bolted. They ran as fast as they could, weaving between the train cars and trying to find their way back to the entrance. The footsteps followed, faster now, and accompanied by the sound of metal scraping against metal. Liam's lungs burned, and his camera gear banged against his side, but he didn't dare slow down. Finally, they saw their car, parked just beyond the last row of train cars. They sprinted for it, practically diving inside. Noah fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking, but the engine roared to life, and they sped away. As they drove, Liam looked back. The figure was standing at the edge of the train yard, watching them go. It didn't move, and yet Liam felt its gaze follow them long after the train yard was out of sight. They didn't talk much on the drive home, the weight of what had happened settling heavily in the silence. Liam never did figure out what he'd seen that night, but the photos he took were enough to keep him awake for weeks. In every shot, there was a shadow, faint but unmistakable, and in the last photo, the shadow was right behind him.